Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about crankbait fishing, and well, I've already done a few videos showing how I fish crankbait in different situations. I've never really discussed the actual tackle involved with it, and I do get a lot of questions as to which rod, reel, line, lure goes together and how all that works. And for most people, crankbait fishing is as simple as just getting something you call a crankbait rod and using it to throw crankbaits, but once you get more into it, you're going to find that one size does not fit all when it comes to tackle. As an example, this is a Berkley Dredger 10.5. This is a crank I use for spotted bay bass. And this is a Strike King 6XD, which is smaller than the 6 Sense Deep Diver, which is about the size of a 10XD. So if you can see this, you can't throw both these things on the same rod effectively, and there's a bunch of sizes and things in between there that you need to comprehend. So the first consideration when choosing a crankbait rod is how far you're going to need to cast the lure to fish it effectively. This is a square bill crankbait. You can see it has a very small lip on it. These are made to run just 1 or 2 feet down. So basically, once you cast and you start winding, you're effectively fishing in the bait at its correct range. If you get into a bait like this, now it has to go 10 feet down. So that bait they don't go straight down, so they go at an angle. So to go down 10 feet, you're probably losing 10 or 15 feet of cast. Then you get into a bait like the 25.5 Berkley Dredger. This bait could take 30 feet diagonally to get to where it's going to be running at depth. So if you cast this bait 30 feet, by the time it gets to depth, it's going to be straight into the boat. Whereas if you're to cast this bait 30 feet, you'd be effectively fishing it through all 30 feet. So based on that, you're going to need to size your rod to something that's going to cast your bait effectively. For the small baits, like this 10.5, all the way up to maybe a 17.5, I like to use a glass rod. This is a Rain Shadow 710 MH E-glass rod, all glass, very soft in the tip, very parabolic. And the advantage of this is these small baits have small hooks. And if you use too stiff of a rod, you're going to pull the hooks out when you're fighting these fish. So the smaller the hook, the softer the rod you want to use. This is matched up with a low-speed reel. This is a Revo inch, but I've swapped the gears out with a Revo winch. This is a 200 size reel, full of 30-pound braid to a 20 or 25-pound leader, 15 to 25-pound leader, depending on if I'm fishing around structure or not. But the low speed is key. This is a 5-to-1 reel that allows you to turn the handle quickly while fishing a crankbait and not work the bait too fast. And then, because if you're winding it really slow and you get a bite, a lot of times you'll not be able to pick up line quickly enough to come tight on that fish. But if you're really winding at this speed to fish a crankbait, it's very easy to come tight. With a higher speed reel, you'd have to be doing this, and then if you get a bite, it's difficult to catch up to it. So the next rod I have is a Graphite Rod. This is a Revelation 80 MH. This is an 8-foot rod. It's all graphite. It's similar to the glass rod, but it has a little more tip to it, and you can fish a little bit bigger bait on this rod. And I'll fish this with these 17.5 range baits up to, I wouldn't throw 25 on it. So I might throw like a Rapala Risto wrap or something like that on this rod. This has the same reel, full of 30-pound braids, a 20 or 25-pound leader. If you're only getting one crankbait rod, this would be it. You can do the lighter lures with it, you can do the heavier lures with it. You can't do the real big ones with it, but this is a good middle of the road one. And this is what I started out with. This rod is probably about 10 years old, and I have expanded on my crankbait arsenal, going lighter and heavier since then, with the glass rod being for the smallest baits, this being a good medium-sized bait rod. For bigger applications, calico bass, sand bass, fishing around rocks, fishing around breakwalls, jetties, things like that, or even throwing shallow at an island, I want to step up to something heavier that has a little more pulling power but still has a softer tip. That's where this Judge comes in. This is the 710H. It's a graphite composite, so it's the RX7 graphite with the the E-glass tip, S-glass tip, and RX7 backbone, which gives it a soft enough tip that you don't rip the hooks out of the fish, but enough backbone to pull on a bigger fish and get it away from structure if you need it. And while this rod is heavier, you can see the hooks on these baits is the Evergreen CR16. They get a lot bigger as you get into this range, which means you don't have to worry so much about pulling them out of the fish as you will with the smaller baits. For this reel, I've stepped up to a Revo Beast 40, and this is the low gear one. I think it's 5:4 to 1. They make a high speed and a low speed. You're going to want the low speed for the same reason you do on a smaller one. This is full of 50-pound braid to a 30 or 40-pound fluorocarbon leader. This will fish anything from the CR16 size up to a 25. If I'm going to be fishing anything bigger than the 25 or 25 bigger, I have a dedicated rod for that. Something that's longer that I can cast there. This is 8 foot. Cast most baits just fine, but if you're getting those real deep divers, like let's say you're fishing Newport Pipe and you want something that's going to run down to 25 or 30 feet, it's going to take a long cast to allow you to get that bait down to depth and actually fish it effectively through the bite zone for an extended period of time. So this is where I step up to the Revelation. This is a 92H, the 9-foot 2-inch graphite rod. It's a telescopic, so freshwater bass guys can put it in their rod locker. I don't do that, so I just glued the piece together when building it. These come in 9.2 and 9'8" or 9'10", and this is the best rod I found for throwing these bigger baits like the 25 up to the 6XD, 10XD, any of the real big baits. So you can absolutely cast them a mile with this, and its length also helps when you begin your retrieve. You just point the rod tip straight down to the water, and that will lower your angle so your bait will get down into the depth range faster. This will allow you the most amount of time in the bite zone with your bait. Same reel, Beast 40, low speed, 50-pound braid. Depending on what I'm fishing with bigger baits like this, 30 or 40-pound fluorocarbon leader. But like I said, you don't need all these rods, but you're going to want a couple eventually, I can guarantee it. So if you start off with like the Revelation 8EMH, nice middle-of-the-road rod, get a feel for it, try it with different size baits, see if you want something lighter, see if you want something heavier, and then go from there. And remember, the deeper the diving bait, the longer rod you're going to want. That's it, crankbait fishing.